Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare. Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Nitya Lila Pravishno Vishnupada Paramahansa Privrajagacharya Stotra Shada Shri Srimad Bhaya Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishno Vishnupada Paramahansa Privrajagacharya Stotra Shada Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupada Srila Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupada Srila Satchidananda Bhaktivinoda Thakur Ki Jai. Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnupada Srila Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj Ki Jai. Shri Gauriya Vaishnav Guru Varga Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Shri Krishna's Kaviraj Thakur Ki Jai. Shri Caitanya Caritamrita Ki Jai. Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. Ganga Mai Ki Jai. Jamuna Mai Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Tulsi Devi Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Bol. All very similar devotees Hare Krishna. All very similar devotees Hare Krishna. All very similar devotees Hare Krishna. All very Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All very Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dina Bandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gora Tushe Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So, welcome again to Sri Caitanya Caritamrita class. We will continue today with our discussion on the second question of the Rai Ramananda Samvad. And it is the first answer of answering the first section of the second question. It's a lot of numbers. But this is the first part of the answer to the second question. And it's referring to the first of the things which Mahaprabhu asked to be elaborated upon. Those three were Krishner Swarup, the Swarup of Krishna. Secondly, what is the Radhar Swarup, the Swarup of Srimati Radharani. And third is Rasa Tattva. And fourth is Prema Tattva Rup. So these four are the four things that are being asked. Also, I reiterate them every time I'm going over them in each class, just the same as I did a tiny recap of the first question of Rai Ramananda Samvad every time we began to touch on it, just to reinforce it. These are ideas that we should really be familiar with. The structure of the Rai Ramananda Samvad is a very systematic structure. In many ways, it's one of the really early systematic elaborations of our philosophy. I was saying this at the very beginning of our study of the Rai Ramananda Samvad, that it's very much like a catechism. And because it's a very systematic going through our philosophy, I think it's very important and very good that we try to internalize the flow and logic of the conversation. It's a good means for us to be familiar with the philosophy of the Caitanya Caritamrita and therefore all of our great previous acharyas. Of course, sometimes the point is made that Srila Prabhupada, he gave us two of the six Goswamis' books. He gave us Upadeshamrita and he gave us Nectar of Devotion, both by Rup Goswami Prabhupada. And so one may say, well, the six Goswamis, they were really the ones authorized by Mahaprabhu. They were really the ones authorized by Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in order to elaborate his philosophy. Practically speaking, the bedrock of our philosophy, the roots, the ground upon which our philosophy comes from, isn't really so much the Vedas in a sense. It is mainly actually the writings of the six Goswamis, which is Vedic literature as well, because it's perfectly explaining it. Even Srimad Bhagavatam, so many different commentaries there were in Srimad Bhagavatam prior to Mahaprabhu. But all of them miss the Gauriya ultimate conclusions of Gauriya Vedanta. So, in this way, we should realize that the bedrock, the real introduction of our Shastric conclusions come from the writings of the six Goswamis. And one might say, well then, Srila Prabhupada, he gave us Ishopanishad, Bhagavad Gita. Like this, he is giving these things, but he is not giving so much of the six Goswamis. But to say such a thing would reveal an ignorance in an understanding of Srila Prabhupada's literary contribution. Sometimes people will be confused. If you look at the history of how Caitanya Caritamrita was published, they'll be confused. Because Srila Prabhupada is translating Bhagavatam, canto after canto, and then he stops. And then in a short span, rather than doing a few volumes of CC, a few volumes of Sri Caitanya Caritamrita, and then a few volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam alternating, he pauses altogether his publishing of Srimad Bhagavatam and publishes the entirety of Sri Caitanya Caritamrita. Actually, it said, he asked his publishers, the obviously not his commercial publishers, only the Bhagavad Gita as it is was really published by a mundane publisher, by Macmillan, the 1972 printing and the 1968, I think, off the top of my head. I wasn't really going to go into the history of Bhagavad Gita, so I can't remember the exact dates, but I know it was 1972, it was maybe also 1968 for the previous edition of Bhagavad Gita as it is. Anyways, but obviously, Srila Prabhupada at this point, his publishers were the Bhaktivedanta Book Trust, the BBT, which is run by his disciples. So he told his disciples, I want Caitanya Caritamrita published 3 times, I think it was 3 times, or at least a much higher rate of publication than is normally done. It was at a number already. Srila Prabhupada's disciples were much more motivated in their publishing work than any mundane publisher. So already they felt they were working at max capacity. But Srila Prabhupada was asking them to do double the amount of books in half the time. Srila Prabhupada was asking, very tall order. But he said, I need this done. This is my command. And they said, Srila Prabhupada, we cannot do. Prabhupada, he was not ready to hear this. Prabhupada, he did not want to hear this. Prabhupada said, get it done. And so, with the instruction of the spiritual master, they sincerely attempted to execute it, and they did. Very quickly, Caitanya Caritamrita was published. Like that, went off the shelves. Not off the shelves, off the printing press. But it can be a bit confusing. Why Caitanya Caritamrita? Caitanya Caritamrita, just in the middle of Bhagavatam's publication. It was not some random stab in the dark. It is because, to now go back to my point about the 6 Goswamis, and this is a point we will delve into more, especially when we get to the end of the Madhya Lila, Rupa and Sanatan Shiksha. The writings of the 6 Goswamis, which are, again, the bedrock of our philosophy, of our thought. Mahaprabhu, he gave very little literary contribution directly, maybe 12 or so shlokas. Verses have been attributed to him. So not so many. But the majority, the great amount then on the other hand, were that of his 6 Goswamis. I was mentioning a few classes ago that Jiva Goswami on his own, his writings are 4 times the length of the Mahabharata. So, in their writings we find our philosophy very elucidated. And it is in Caitanya Caritamrita, and especially in this chapter of the Rai Ramananda Samvad, that we find that consolidated, we find it condensed. The Caitanya Caritamrita in many ways is a survey of all of the 6 Goswamis' writings, and it is a condensation of them. It is trying to present the various topics of all of them in a cohesive 3-volume text. So, the Caitanya Caritamrita, in many ways, Srila Prabhupada, he stopped, because this is the way that Srila Prabhupada gave all the teachings of the 6 Goswamis here in the Caitanya Caritamrita. This is why Caitanya Caritamrita so quickly like this was taken out. It seems, when one looks at the timetable, to be like a random diversion, but actually, quite the opposite. It was a very practical application, and this way Srila Prabhupada so mercifully has given the conclusions of all the 6 Goswamis. So then, coming back now to the reason why I started making this point. So then, if the Caitanya Caritamrita is to be a condensation, a presentation of the thought of the Shad Goswamis, of the 6 Goswamis, then the Rai Ramananda Samvad, in many ways being the essence of that, is a very systematic teaching. It is a way of teaching through the conclusions of those works. Many people, they wish to rush into the Goswami literature, but actually Srila Prabhupada so nicely has given us through his translation of what Sri Krishnadas Kaviraj Thakur has given us, a wonderful pathway through the Goswami Granthas. So that is why I said it is very important for us to get familiar with this structure, because this structure is very well thought out. It is not just the random thoughts of Krishnadas Kaviraj Thakur or Rai Ramananda. It is a very specifically and artistically constructed model, structure by which one can explore the ideas of the Goswamis. And if one wants to be qualified to go through the ideas of the Goswamis, one should become very familiar with the structure. Otherwise one will be confused. Again, 4 times the length of the Mahabharata for just one of the 6 Goswamis. That is not that is not an easy thing to maneuver through. And at least the Mahabharata is one cohesive narrative. The other texts, they're here, all sorts of places. If one looks at the list of all of the books Bhanu Maharaj has translated, they'll be very confused at this wide variety that is available. So, until and unless we get an idea of the structure of the topics and of the structure of the texts, we will again be bewildered and confused. So, this very nicely and very attentively detailed skeleton, if you will, of the Goswami conclusions is very important to be intimate with, which is why I'm repeating at the beginning of every single Rai Ramananda class, I'm repeating the structure of each question so that we can really internalize them. The structure is very intentional by the most expert of architects. It is like sometimes we'll visit a house and you can tell if the house was designed well or not. Some houses, they just don't make sense. And some houses, no matter where you go, you need to ask the directions all the time and it's confusing. Everything's not really natural. And other houses you'll visit and you don't even need to ask for directions. Sometimes it's like this. You don't need to have the awkward conversation of, Prabhu, where's the restroom? You don't need to ask almost in some houses. Naturally, you're able to tell because so wonderfully it's been designed, the architecture of such buildings. It's so intuitive. It taps so naturally into all of these things. Also, we also take into account the Vastu Shastra, the Vastu. If the house is done according to proper architecture, it is also auspicious. In the same way, if we understand the architecture that Rai Ramananda is proposing for understanding the Goswami's books, not only will we be able to naturally maneuver through them when we reach the point of reading them, and we should reach that point, maybe His Holiness Bhakti Vikas Swami gives a rather nice instruction of once one has completed all of Srila Prabhupada's books 3 times, then they can start reading some other books, not the more esoteric advanced ones. But not only will we be able to have a good bearing of the localities, but also there will be auspiciousness because we have entered through in the way that Krishnadas Kaviraj Thakur has so mercifully given us and Srila Prabhupada felt so important to give us so early. So then, coming back, Rai Ramananda, what has he done? He has answered. He has answered the point of the first of the 4 things being asked about in the second question. And what was that? Krishner Shorup. So he wanted to know about the nature of Krishna. And we said the shloks yesterday. So I'll go through the qualities quickly today, and then we will speak about the other element. Because the first sort of points that he makes are very much speaking about tattva. We were speaking about how the Brahma Samhita is speaking of tattva, and the Krishna Caritamrita is speaking of rasa or lila. And in a similar way, we'll find this. The first set of qualities is very much speaking about the tattva, the nature of Krishna. And the next set of qualities is very much speaking about the rasa. So, what does it begin with? It begins very, very nicely with Parama Ishwar Krishna. Krishna is the supreme controller. Krishna is Parama Ishwar. He's not just Ishwar, he is not just a controller, but he is the supreme controller. He is Ishwareshwar. He is the Lord of all Ishwars. He is the Ishwar of all Ishwars. Actually, in the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the gopis at one point they glorify Krishna in this way. We know Yogeshwar. Yogeshwar is a name of Shiva. And Shiva is very great. He's a master of all of these yogic potencies. But what title do they give to Krishna? They say Yogeshwar Eshwar. The Lord of yoga, the Lord of all of these mystical processes. So Krishna, he is the supreme controller, and we should understand this. And if we properly understand this, it has a very practical impact in our life. Because we might think, what is the value? Maybe I will understand who is truly the supreme being, but what practical value does it have? Or rather, maybe we'll think the other way around. How can we recognize in our lives if we are properly understanding that Krishna is the highest authority, the highest controller? And the way that we can understand this is if our anxieties, if our worries, they begin to recede away. This is one of the means by which we can see the symptom of this. Because if we are anxious and worried about things, it implies that we think there is a controller that is not under Krishna's control. We are thinking that there is some controller who can influence separate from Krishna. Because whatever Krishna wants is what we want. Whatever Krishna wants will happen. And whatever Krishna wants is what is best for us. We should have no anxiety, no worry. Krishna, we simply do our best, and the rest is in Krishna's control. Because Krishna is Parama Ishwar, he is Parameshwar, he is Ishvara Parama Krishna. And whatever he wants is the best for his devotee. So if we merely go ahead executing our devotional service with sincerity, then there is no need to worry. If we worry, that means we do not have full faith that Krishna is the supreme controller. We think there is some controller who is outside of Krishna's authority. And so we'll worry about many things. And so many people are worrying about so many things. Especially now, with coronavirus, so many devotees are worried. And that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be safe and careful and do our best to be healthy and diligent in these times. But if people are worrying all the time, thinking this and that, then that is showing they are not fully trusting that everything is under Krishna's control. They're thinking that there's Parameshwar, Krishna, and there is a separate Ishwar, Karuna. Karuna Ishwar, Karuneshwara. They're thinking like this, because this is what such anxieties reflect. In fact, you'll find in Christian circles, they'll say, to be anxious is to be a sin. Because to be anxious is implying a idolatry, to worship something which is not God as God. Because if you are saying, I'm worried what this thing will do, just to clarify, I'm not referring to anxiety as the actual mental health problem. That's a separate thing in the category of like depression. That's a medical problem. I'm speaking more of the colloquial thing. I just need to clarify that. I'm not trying to shame people who are suffering from the mental health ailment of anxiety, but it is a sin, the Christians will say, because you are saying that this thing which is causing me anxiety, I think it is more powerful than Krishna, or God in their sense. So Parameshwar Krishna, Krishna is the supreme controller, and therefore we should have no worries. This is one of the elements of surrender. We should understand that we should take Krishna to be the ultimate guardian, the ultimate protector, who is caring for our every need. And the other application for this is that we understand. Sometimes we hold on to our previous samskars. We will think we will worship Krishna, but we will also, just on the side, maybe we'll worship Hanuman for some benefit. Maybe we'll worship Agni or Indra or Vayu. We will worship for some benefit Durga. We can worship all of these beings. For sure, and ask them for the benefits of being a devotee. We can ask them to help us grow in our spiritual life. But sometimes people, they will still wish to go back. Even some days they will say, pray to Ganesh before an exam that you may do well in your exam. This is also not reflecting that Krishna is Parameshwar. This is thinking, I need to go to some other Ishwar, some other controller. They are ignoring the fact that what? Sarva Karana Pradhana. Krishna is the supreme cause of all causes. So Ganesh cannot actually cause anything to happen. Removed from Krishna's desire to cause it. Ganesh cannot cause anything on his own. In fact, it is said that Ganesh, he is what? He's the remover of obstacles. But who does Ganesh worship in order to be the remover of obstacles? It is not that he has the potency on his own. Actually, Ganesh is a Narasingha Bhakta. He is a devotee of Narasingha Dev. And because Narasingha Dev is Vigna Vinasana, the destroyer of obstacles, because of this is how Ganesh has the potency to destroy obstacles in the people who worship him. So, why worship Ganesh when one can honor Ganesh, not blaspheme him? All glories to Ganesh, Sri Ganesha ki jai. But only if we understand him as a devotee of Narasingha Dev. So we should say Narasingha Bhakta Ganesha ki jai. This is how we should understand him. And in this sense we can worship. But why worship with the intent of removing obstacles in our life when we can worship Narasingha Dev, the source of that? This is how we should understand that Krishna is Parameshwar. There need not be any other Ishwar in our life. And even if we then ignore the idea of demigods, we may think of other authorities, we may be scared of all sorts of other things. Srila Prabhupada was so fearless, the way we saw him act, because he understood, Krishna is on my side. And if the Supreme Lord is on my side, if the Supreme Controller is on my side, then what fear do I need to have? Fear itself is the result of not really reckoning that Krishna is Parameshwar. Saint Paul says in the Bible that if God is for us, then who can stand against us? So if we truly believe that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, that he is the Supreme Controller, and he is on our side, then we should fear nothing. Because who can stand against us? Who can stand against the march of the devotee? If Govinda is on our side. So we should understand this. Then the next point, we can actually speak forever in each one of these qualities, but I'll move on to the next aspect which is identified. Swayam Bhagavan. So he is Swayam Bhagavan. He is personally the Supreme Personality of Godhead. We know the famous text, Ete Changsha. We know in Srimad Bhagavatam, I'm forgetting the number. It's Canto 1, Chapter 3, text, I think 27. I could be wrong though. I'm mind blanking now. But it says Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Krishna. But Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And some people might say, you'll find other shastras where it says Ramo Bhagavan Swayam. Where it says Shiva Bhagavan Swayam. Shiva is himself Swayam Bhagavan. Ramachandra is Swayam Bhagavan. Because what does it mean to be Swayam Bhagavan? It means that next quality which is being listed, Shurbo Obotari, Sarva Avatari, the source of all incarnations. But we must understand that Krishna is the actual Avatari. He is the actual original Swayam Bhagavan, who is the source of all other things. How can we say this if other shastras say these other things? We must reconcile by understanding all these other texts must be understood in light of the most absolute, the most authoritative statement. So, Ramchandra is an expansion of Krishna, and in this sense he is Swayam Bhagavan. Shiva is in his own category, but he is the mixture. Like Krishna is like milk, and you mix in a tiny bit of curd with milk, and then you make more yogurt, more curd. In the same way, a bit of Maya, and then you mix that in, and then you create Shiva. But Shiva is still, in that sense, identified with Vishnu Tattva in a very unique relationship. So in this way, you can also understand that statement. But then you might say, well, why can't we say Krishna is the incarnation of Ramchandra? Why can't we say this? You're saying that we need to take the statement Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. Well, I'll take the one which says that Ramchandra is Bhagavan Swayam. And I'll say we need to understand that Krishna is the incarnation of Ramchandra. Why can't we do this? 2 points must be made. First, and we won't go into too much, but Srimad Bhagavatam is the highest Purana. So famous. Amalam Puranam. Amalam Puranam, Vaishnavanam Priyam. It is the favorite of the Vaishnavas. And it is the spotless Purana. It is the ripened fruit, it is the juice of the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. At length, Jiva Goswami in his Tattva Sandarbha, he has authoritatively proved that Srimad Bhagavatam is the highest of all the Puranas. It is the highest of all Vedic literature, actually, because it naturally is a commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. And the Vedanta Sutra is the condensed form of the authoritative conclusions of the Vedas. Furthermore, this perfect Srimad Bhagavatam, it is glorified in the other Puranas like this. It is a commentary on the Gayatri Mantra. The Gayatri Mantra is so great. His Holiness Bhanu Maharaj was saying in a class that actually all the Vedic literature expands from the Pranava, from this, from the Om syllable, but actually the Gayatri also expands out from this Om. So it's very primordial. So it is a commentary on this expansion of the Pranava. So, and being in a commentary on the Gayatri, it is very elevated. So the Bhagavatam is a very high pramana. So when the Bhagavatam says it, as compared to these other Shastras, the Bhagavatam is a higher statement. But even more than this, we can even say literally. Literarily. Because what is it? Krishna's tu Bhagavan Swayam. Tu. What does the word tu mean? If we listen to Bhagavatam classes often, we'll hear, the constant Parama, Supreme, Ishwar, Controller, and then everyone, like this. So we would have heard sometimes tu. Tu means but, or also. However, it has this meaning. And why is it being put here? Because in the context of Bhagavatam, this statement, Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam, comes after a list of all these various incarnations and forms of the Supreme Lord. So after listing all of these, then what does the Bhagavatam, which is already the highest authority, say? It says, but. When you say but, that means this is in a category different to everything else we've said. If it said cha, Krishnascha Bhagavan Swayam, that and Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan, this would be a different point. But it doesn't say and. It doesn't say in the same way as all of these previous forms, Krishna is Swayam Bhagavan. It says Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. But in a way different to all these other forms that have been listed before, Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Krishna is Bhagavan himself. And so in this way we understand he is Sarva Avatari. He is the Supreme Personality of Godhead in a way that all of these other forms aren't, because he is the source of all other forms. All other Vishnu Tattva forms, and there's so many different types of avatars. His Grace Ghanasham Govinda Prabhu already actually a few months ago now, has already so nicely gone through his lecture series about the types of incarnations. So if anyone wants to hear about that, they can go back to those classes. But we know there's all these different forms of avatars. There's the Purusha avatars, there's the Guna avatars, Lila avatars, Yuga avatars, Shaktya Vesh avatars, all these different forms, doing all sorts of various things, and they're also glorious. Even forms like Mohini Devi, she only appeared for a very specific time. Jiva Goswami in his Laghu Bhagavatamrita, he says this, Dhanvantari and Mohini, they both appeared for a very specific pastime, and so their forms, even though in one sense they're eternal, they're very specific. So even those forms, how sweet and wonderful are the pastimes. Mohini, she captivates all of these various beings with her beauty. And this is only an expansion. Ramchandra, how much the Ramayana has captured the hearts of, people will say India loves Ramayana. India does love Ramayana. But even you go to all these other countries, Bali, I was so surprised, in Bali they have their own traditions of Ramayana. I went to the I was visiting Melbourne, and I visited one of the Melbourne art museums, and I saw there was the international art. I was very interested to see. They had really interesting things from all these countries, and they had from Bali or Thailand. I think it was Bali. They had all of these puppets, and they would act out Ramayana there. How captivating Ramchandra's pastimes are. How much they capture the imaginations and the hearts of people, not just in India, but everywhere. So wonderful these pastimes are. And all these other forms, Nrsimha Dev. I know when I was little growing up, it was my favorite thing to hear. I used to love singing Nrsimha. I mean, I still am little, and I still am growing up. But when I was very little, I used to love Nrsimha Arti. How wonderful the pastime Nrsimha Dev coming down. How much glories. I used to think it was so cool. We can sing this prayer and we can go into so much detail. The wasp-like Hiranyakashipu being torn apart by the beautiful nails of Nrsimha Dev. How beautiful are all these pastimes. And they're so wonderful to hear. Everyone loves to hear the churning of the milk ocean. Or how Hiranyaksha was destroyed by Varahadev. And then if we speak of other avatars, Shakti-Avesh avatars, we even like to hear of Buddha, or of Parashuram, his vengeance, killing all of the various Kshatriyas, is terrible in one sense, scary, but is also relishable. We still like the Vira Rasa, that heroic rasa, that with a bit of violence in it. So how wonderful. And then even Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada is not directly Krishna. Anyone who says that is rascal number one. Actually, I was hearing one bogus guru, many bogus gurus. We were actually speaking how Kibo Bipro, Kibo Nashi. It doesn't matter if you are a Brahmin or a sannyasi. And we were saying that actually sometimes people will think I want an Indian guru. Because they are missing the point of the essence. Not to say, of course, that I'm not implying then that one should not want an Indian-bodied guru. My revered spiritual master is Indian-bodied. But I was making the point, if that is the criteria that one is thinking, it is materialistic. And if one is thinking on that material platform, actually that's a bad train of thought. No country in the world has more bogus gurus than India. Of course, there's so many revered spiritual masters there as well, but there's many bogus ones. Anyways, one of these bogus ones, he was trying to glorify Prabhupada. But in his rascaldom, he was just speaking nonsense. Better he would have kept his mouth shut. He was saying that Prabhupada is Krishna directly himself, coming onto the earth. I was hearing, there's a rascal. People who say this are rascals. Nothing more, nothing less. They have no understanding of spiritual knowledge and they should be rejected. If one hears any nonsense, they should close their ears to hear such bogus conceptions being presented. But Srila Prabhupada was an avatar, a Shakti-Avesh avatar, empowered by Krishna, filled with Krishna's Shakti, specifically the Shakti of Nityananda Prabhu. But I won't go off onto a tangent. And how much do we love hearing the pastimes of Srila Prabhupada? How relishable is the Lilamrita? All these things. So glorious are all the avatars of Krishna. So then how glorious must that avatari be? There's the avatara. Avataras are coming down from the avatari, the source of the avatars. So how glorious must that avatari, that Krishna who is Bhagavan Swayam be? So this is so much nectar, all the nectar that we hear about anything, about the pastimes of Krishna, or about the pastimes of any incarnation, all of that, and so much more is packed into Krishna, and that is brought out by these two statements here, Swayam Bhagavan and Sarva Avatari. And then we hear Sarva Karana Pradhana. He is the supreme cause of all causes. And this is a very specific quality. This is a very important one. Because sometimes we will hear of like People will say, how can there not be a God? How can there not be a God? The world is so beautiful. Who could design all of these wonderful animals? All of these wonderful ecosystems? And this is a good point. It is very clear that there must be an intelligent designer. If one was to, even if I were to show somebody, if I were to take a car, if I were to drive a car to someone, and a person would say, cool car, where did you get it? And I would say, oh, you know, just a few chemicals here and there, a bit of metal here, a bit of petroleum there. They all, you know, after a few million years, they all assembled together into this wonderful car. The person would either laugh, call me an idiot, or they would admit me to a mental hospital. Those are the only responses. And yet when people say that about the infinitely more complex world, how can we say the world is more complex? Well, we can build a car. We can build a car from scratch, almost. We can build a car from the raw materials. We cannot build a human from the raw materials. So this point is valid that there must be an intelligent designer. But that intelligent designer doesn't need to be Krishna. That intelligent designer can be, and practically is, Brahma. It is Brahma who assembles all the worlds. But what Brahma is not, Brahma may be the assembler, but he is not Sarvakarana Pradhana. Because Brahma himself, he is caused. Brahma is born from Krishna. Brahma is born from the navel, we know, coming out on the lotus flower, like that. And that lotus flower is glowing. Actually, it's glowing with the effulgence. We were all there in the stem. It glows. The reason why it has that glowing effulgence is because of all the jivas. We were all present there at that time before we were sent out into our respective bodies in the before we were sent out into our respective bodies. We were already inserted in the Mahatattva. So, Brahma, he is caused. He is not the cause of all causes. So therefore, how can he be supreme? Because if anything is caused, then whatever caused it is the higher thing. Rascal atheists who think they're very intelligent. I remember in high school, some people, my peers, they would be atheists, and they thought, oh, they're very intelligent. I would make the points of why God must be real. Not just why God can be real. They'll say, show us some evidence God is real. There's not just some evidence God is real. There are conclusive arguments that God must be real. But they are all rascals who just want to enjoy their pathetic materialistic lives of filthy sense gratification. So they won't accept this obvious conclusion. But they will, with lots of confidence, say, well, if this world needs a creator, then so does God. Well, who created God then? They'll say, if God caused this world, then who created God? They'll say like this. They'll think very intelligent. Just rascals. Rascals and fools. Actually, at this point, almost it's better not to entertain them. Just leave them to their own ways. Some people are, if they're not favorable enough, what to do? We should not preach. It is almost offensive. Let them be purified by prasad and hearing the holy name in Sankirtan. And then after that purification happens, then we can try again to preach to them. But they'll say this, who caused God? If you're saying the universe must have a cause and God is the cause, then who created God? But the point is that you cannot have an infinite chain. You can't have an infinite chain of causes. There must be an uncaused cause. At one point, there must be a cause that is not caused itself. You cannot have an infinite regress. You cannot have an infinite chain. Because it's like somebody might say, the atheist might say, well, maybe it goes on forever. It goes on forever and ever and ever and ever. But actually, this makes sense with some things. Time goes back infinitely backwards. Time goes forward infinitely forwards. This universe is anadi. It never had a beginning. It only gets manifest and unmanifest. But causation is not like that. Because it's like if you have an electrical cable and there's power coming out one end of the cable and you say, where is the electricity coming from? It can't be that somebody just says, oh, the cable just goes on forever. It cannot be that one says, oh, the cable is just going on forever and forever and forever and forever and forever, and therefore there's no electricity. There needs to be a Shaktiman. There needs to be a person or an entity at least, and later on it's very clear that that entity must be a person who's putting the electricity through that long chain. It is not that you can have a chain of causes without something to activate that chain of causes. You need somebody to push the first domino in the chain of dominoes. You need somebody to give the energy for causation to happen. Otherwise, there can be links in a chain that goes forever, but there needs to be a source of the power for there to be the electricity to flow through. And therefore, there must be an ultimate cause. And who is that ultimate cause? He's none other than our dear Parameshwar Krishna, because he is Sarva Karana Pradhana. You'll find this train of thought in every single culture. Every single culture where philosophy has come up, you read the ancient Greeks, you read the medieval Christian philosophers, you read the philosophers of the Muslim Golden Age. All of them will say this thing: there must be an uncaused cause. There must be a first cause which was never caused, who is the cause of all other causes. And who is that? Here, the Vedic literatures and Rai Ramananda is telling us it is that sweet blue boy who plays the flute, who plays his sweet, beautiful flute in the green groves of Vrindavan Dham. That is the Sarva Karana Pradhana. So, this is text 134. Then on text 135, Ananta Vaikuntha, there are innumerable Vaikuntha planets. And there are innumerable incarnations. There are innumerable universes in the material world. And Shobar Adhar. They are all found resting in Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, a few things to be said about this. One is that this very much leads on from the previous point about Sarva Karana Pradhana. If you are to be the cause of everything, Brahma is caused by something else, but Brahma is caused by the causeless Krishna. But if you're the cause of everything, then you're also not just physically the shelter of everything, but also existentially. The material universes cannot exist without Krishna being Sarva Karana Pradhana, without Krishna being the bedrock of existence. Nothing can exist without Krishna making it exist. Krishna is supporting its existence. So there's Ananta Vaikuntha. There's infinite Vaikuntha planets. And there's also Ananta Brahmanda. But there's also infinite material universes. Now this can be confusing for some people, because they will say, well, I've read, Prabhu, in the Ishopanishad, that there's Ekapad, and there is Tripad. There is the 1/4. There's 1/4 of all existence, and there's 3/4. And 1/4 of all existence is the material universes, and 3/4 are the unlimited Vaikuntha universes. So if both are unlimited, doesn't that mean they should be the same amount? And on one hand, we have to say, Achintya Gunaswarupam, Yam Shyama Sundaram Achintya Gunaswarupam Govinda Madipurusham Tamaham Bhajami. That Shyama Sundar, whose qualities are completely inconceivable, that Govinda, I worship him. We have to say that. Such things are inconceivable. But one way to try to understand this is to use a mathematical example. And please forgive me if this example is a little dry, maybe. Because we know there are infinite numbers. No matter how large a number you have, there's always +1. Which can be sometimes it can be a little bit of a headache for some parents. I know many children do it. I did it when I was very small as well. I would say, is there a number bigger than 100 and so and so and so and so? And my parents would say yes. And I'd say, what's that number? And then I'd say, is there a number bigger than that? And then I'll say, is there a number bigger than that? Is there a number bigger than that? And I'll keep on going until my parents said, hey, Ade, stop talking. And then they would say, the biggest number is infinity. And then I'd say, is there infinity plus one? And in a sense, there is infinity plus one. But actually, if you go beyond what you would tell a small child, it's a little complex because infinity isn't strictly a number and there's different types of infinity. But that's a tangent. We know that there are unlimited numbers, so we can say all numbers are unlimited. But we also know that there are more non-prime numbers. People should know what a prime number is. A prime number is a number that is only divisible. It is only divisible by 1 and itself. So 3 is a prime number, 7 is a prime number, 11 is a prime number. Because the factors, all the numbers that can be factored into that are all either 1 and the number of itself. You cannot multiply any whole number to get 11 or to get 7 or to get 3. Besides, in the case of 3, 1 and 3. So there are more non-prime numbers. For example, every single even number is not prime. Every single even number is a multiple of 2. So by this nature, because every single even number is non-prime, but not every odd number is prime. Because of this, already, naturally, because of the huge amount of even numbers, there are more non-prime numbers than there are prime numbers. But there are infinite prime numbers and there are infinite non-prime numbers. In the same way, we can understand there are infinite material universes, even though there are still less than the infinite Vaikuntha planets. So in this way we can understand that there are 3 times the amount of Vaikuntha universes than material universes. Even though there is an infinite, there is an ananta of both. Sorry for the dry explanation. But sometimes people get a headache over this when they read Ishopanishad, or they've read Ishopanishad and then they read this. And then the other point that's made is there's Ananta Avatar. I will only briefly mention this. It is said that all the avatars of Krishna, they come out like waves in the ocean. You go to the ocean, you can see. We can go to the beach and we can see the ocean. We can go to Bondi Beach or some other beach. Those of us near the North Sydney Temple, we can go to Manly and all of the other beaches in the northern beaches. I don't know them too well. I'm a bit too busy to go to the beaches, but you can go to the beach and we can see the beautiful beaches and all the waves, they're coming and they're crashing onto the shore, coming constantly like this. In the same way, constantly incarnations of Krishna are coming out, crashing onto the shore. This is a very beautiful way to understand. So many, and they are all Shobar Adhar. So these 2 qualities, Ananta Vaikuntha and Ananta Brahmanda, that he is the shelter of these 2, they come from the fact that Krishna is Sarva Karana Pradhan. But that Ananta Avatar, that all the avatars are sheltered in Krishna, that is coming from the fact that Krishna is Sarva Avatari. So like this text 135 very naturally proceeds from text 134. So now we'll speak of text 136 and 137, and then we will conclude for today, and then tomorrow we will continue about the further rasic qualities of Krishna. So then, what are the next qualities? Satchidananda Tanu. Krishna's body is transcendental. It is composed of Satchid Ananda. So we know Sat is eternity. Transcendental. Eternity can also mean true, can mean all sorts of things. But eternity is how Prabhupada renders it. And Chit, it is full of knowledge or consciousness. And Ananda, bliss. If it was just Sat, it would be the Brahman effulgence. Just existence, pure existence. We know the famous analogy of the sun globe. It would just be like the sunlight, just vague, Sat. If there's Sat and Chit, that is like then the sun globe itself, not just the sun rays, but the actual surface of the sun. Because there's some shape to it. There's some personality. This is the Paramatma feature. But there's some shape, but there's not so much excitement, not so much movement. But if you add Ananda, you get to the sun god in the center. And in that sense, you get to Bhagavan, Satchidananda Bhagavan. And in this aspect, there's movement, there's personality. There's not just form, there's a dynamic personality, and that is Krishna. That is the Bhagavan aspect. Satchidananda. Because what does it say? Canto 1, Chapter 2, text. Oh, I'm forgetting all my Bhagavatam shloka numbers today. But it says, Brahmeti Paramatmeti Bhagavan iti shabdyate. The great sages, they call these names, Brahman, Paramatma, Bhagavan. And our acharyas have understood it in this way. They are said in this order because each one is getting greater than the previous one, with greater qualities. First with Sat, then with Chit, then with Ananda. And so we're hearing all of these great qualities. This is very majestic. Eternity, bliss, knowledge. These are the glorious qualities, very cosmic. The cosmic Krishna. And then what comes right after? Vrajendra Nandana, the son of Maharaj Nanda, the son of Vraja Indra, the king of Vraj. Vrajendra Nandana. What a great contrast. And this is the contrast which defines Krishna. This is why this contrast is so, this is why these qualities are being listed next to each other. And actually, I don't think we will have time tonight to continue on to the second half of the text. So tomorrow we will continue the second half of the text. But the second half of the text continues this pattern. Because this is what defines Krishna. So much opulence, so much majesty. And then what happens straight after? Vrajendra Nandana. He is the son of Nanda Maharaj. He is that sweet son who so much pleases his father by carrying his father's shoes on his head, that is playing in his court. That Vrajendra Nandana, that sweet aspect we were speaking earlier about the glories of Vatsalya Ras. Nanda Maharaj sees Krishna and he says, I need to take care of him. He sees Satchidananda Tanu. He sees that person whose body is made of Satchidananda, all knowledge, all bliss, all eternity. He sees that body and he says, oh, I hope he's been fed today. I hope he's eaten. He sees this and he's completely captivated. This is the contrast that Rai Ramananda is bringing up by mentioning these two aspects next to each other. That's Satchidananda Tanu, that form, all bliss, all knowledge, infinite bliss, infinite knowledge, infinite eternity. It is cuddled by Vrajendra Nanda, by Vrajendra, by Nanda Maharaj. It is cuddled by him, and it is supported by him, and it is nurtured by him. The opulence of Krishna is unlimited. And that opulence does not go away. He is always Satchidananda Tanu. But in the same way, if we take a blade of grass and drop it in a pot of milk, we lose, that grass does not go away. That grass is not destroyed, but it is lost in the sweetness of the milk. In the same way, all of that Satchidananda, all of that majesty, it is there, but it is ignored in order to be able to hug Krishna, in order to be able to try to nurture Krishna. This is the contrast Rai Ramananda is bringing out by putting these two statements next to each other. So with that, we will conclude for today. I thought we would get further into it, but so much nectar to be said in these texts. I don't want to give excuses, but it's just so, we could speak forever about any of these qualities. This conversation is so nectarian. There's so much so many wondrous details. And they just make the heart so excited. I'm sorry to gush, but I'm so happy to be able to speak about the Rai Ramananda Samvad to you all. I thank anyone who's listening. I thank you for providing for me the opportunity to speak on this. It's so nectarian, so inspiring, so joyful to speak about. So with that, we will conclude that, and then tomorrow we will continue the second half of text 136, and then we will continue this glorification of all of the various qualities of Krishna that are being listed as the respective aspects of Krishna's Swarup by Sri Ramananda Rai. Sri Krishna's Kaviraj Thakur ki jai, Sri Caitanya Caritamrita ki jai, Shri Rai Ramananda ki jai, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki jai, Shri Rai Ramananda Samvad ki jai, Shri Krishner Swarupa ki jai, Nitai Gaura Premanande, Hari Hari Bo. Hare Krishna.